The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Unconventional Therapist. I am your host, Dave. I'm joined with Greg. He is another host. We are two hosts for The Unconventional Therapist. This is your guide to nothing, a place where you're going to learn about nothing.
Yeah.
How was that? Did I sound
I like that new sort of, it seems a little redundant, but I do like it.
Yeah.
I know what I'm getting myself into, and it takes a lot of the pressure off to know that we know nothing.
And you know what, Greg? It did sound a little redundant, and that does let the people know that you're going to listen to two people who are sort of redundant.
Yeah. What? Hey, you may hear a lot of, you've heard this story before, but I think I'm going to tell it anyway. Right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Hey, Dave, maybe this story has happened before.
He just did it.
I did
it. Wow.
See,
I fell for it too.
You did. I actually just beautifully sort of segued into this whole thing. And if you don't mind, I'd like to kind of, not do this crazy overview like I usually do, although I probably will end up doing it. But there's like couple little questions inside of this thing.
Okay.
So,
but Greg, just to drive up your anxiety a little bit.
Sure.
Let's take a quick pause.
You know what? Sometimes I do need a little pause to slow me down.
You went to the beach the other day.
I know. And I'm all kinds of burnt. I might be a little sunsick.
How'd you get a day off from one of your 5 jobs?
Hey, listen, it was a Sunday and I respect the Sabbath.
Yeah.
So you got to. Actually, going to the beach with my kids is harder than any job you can ever imagine.
Is it?
Some of them are like, catching crabs. That doesn't sound right. Forget it. This is why I don't tell stories.
That's your old one.
Yeah, that's my Navy. I'm not telling another Navy story here. Yeah. So listen, boy. Dave, one of the biggest unexplained mysteries of all of our lives is what happens after we die, right?
Yeah.
So we all kind of like want this proof that something exists besides our, this mortal existence.
Right.
We've talked about it a little bit with our near-death experiences, but maybe we get a little bit closer with this next topic, Dave.
Go on.
Okay. So have you ever seen this show growing up, and it's kids say the darndest things?
No.
Really? Okay. So it was like,
I don't think I've ever watched an episode of that show.
It's funny because like kids do say the darndest things.
It's coming back too, I think.
Is it again?
I think Travis Kelce is. Oh no, is that Are You Smarter Than the Fifth Grader he's hosting? Or is it? Yeah. Whoops, wrong one.
That's pretty fitting.
Same stuff though.
I mean, we're not huge Travis Kelce fans over here in New England.
And just kids saying outlandish things, right?
Yeah, it's funny. So this is kind of what we're talking about. Kind of.
Who hosted that?
Well, Bill Cosby hosted
Your hero?
No, not my hero.
Bill Cosby?
No. There was all kinds of.
Didn't you whenever we're off air, you always talk about how, you feel like your family represents the Huxtable well and that you're a huge Bill Cosby family guy. Like,
so you're the one that knows like their proper name.
Proper name?
You know that they went to like Hill College. Yeah. Oh, so listen, the kids do say the darndest things, but it's rare that they say things like, "Hey, I was a Vietnam vet," or "I was in a concentration camp," or "I was a business executive and my plane crashed." You know what I mean? But this happens, right? These kids make claims of a past life. And what's interesting is a lot of the times it's verified, or at least, that's up for debate, right? But these kids, they really shouldn't be having insight enough to make these crazy stories up, like to talk about Vietnam or a flight deck or World War I or what, you know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting. So like we're gonna try to like decide,
or like the invention of Jell-O pudding pops.
Oh God, we're still going with the Cosby thing, huh?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? See, that's another sort of interesting episode. You have to sometimes take the art away from.
Yeah.
Like, can you enjoy the art?
Wait, are Jell-O pudding pops still around?
No,
because of the Cosby.
I think so.
Wow, that's sad.
Bad publicity. It is.
Wait, was a Jell-O pudding pop basically just a fudgesicle?
Yeah, I wouldn't know. We always had the cheap fudgicles.
Yeah, like the ones you get. Like there's a ton of them in a box, and yeah, that's what we used to get too.
And you don't bite them; you just kind of like.
All right, I don't know where you're going with that one.
All right, so obviously
you don't bite a popsicle though.
Right. Yeah, obviously I'm talking about some form of reincarnation here, right? But we're not gonna dive into reincarnation as an episode here because it's its own thing, and that could be a really, that's a philosophical belief, that could be a religious belief. It's essentially the idea that your non-physical essence, your soul, Dave, is animating or transmigrating into a different being, like jumping into something else.
I'm just going to clear this up for everyone because I have no idea what the hell you just said. We're talking about child's past lives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So children with past lives.
So I have not made that clear. You're right.
I did not get that from what you were saying.
Okay.
You said that's what we're talking about here. I don't even know if you know what they mean.
Some children have these, visions of a life that was lived that could not have
been. I just said that. Child past lives. I just said that.
Right.
So sometimes they like remember things that happened in the time before that was in another lifetime, I would say.
Just like to hey, whether we're going with the theme of redundancy. Listen, this is a central tenet in some of these major religions. Actually, it's like 50%.
Is it
50% of the world's religions believe in reincarnation? Oh yeah.
Do you?
No. No, I don't.
Hot take right there.
Yeah, I don't. Like Hinduism, Buddhism, even Judaism.
All right, we're gonna come back to your beliefs later on.
Yeah. I mean, look, people I respect greatly, obviously. Like even like I love philosophy, like Plato, Socrates, Pythagoras. They're all huge proponents of reincarnation. But for me, like there's one thing that the Dalai Lama says famously, that it would be difficult for science to disprove reincarnation. It's like, yeah, also probably pretty hard to prove it, right? But we're gonna make a pretty decent case for it here, I think, with a few of these things.
He's not asking you to prove it. He's saying disprove it. He's like, tell me I'm wrong, right? And you can't. So that's the proof.
Yeah.
Is actually that the most proof you can actually ask for?
No, that's actually like a thought fallacy. I can't remember exactly the name of it. Where just because you can't prove that just because you can't disprove something certainly does not make it true.
You didn't debunk it though.
No. I mean, this isn't even. Does that hold up in court?
If this was an episode of Ghost Hunters, if you couldn't debunk that that there was something paranormal happening, it exists.
Yeah, I know, and that's why again, Zach Bagans in the Ghost Hunters. Oh wait, is he?
I was thinking of Taps, like the
Ghost Hunters. No, you're right. Yeah, I think the Ghost Adventures are the Zach Bagans. So Dave, why don't you give us a little, since you know so much, why don't you give us a little brief info on what is this past lives and kids?
Yes, let me talk a little bit about this time that people, especially children, might remember a thing that happened in another lifetime.
Yeah.
So, yeah, past lives. All right. So essentially what it is exactly what you said. It's a child might come out and say this thing that really throws off a parent, right? Or a caretaker. And it's like, how did they know this thing? How did they have this recollection? And I guess, as they go along, they put things together and it turns out that this child is not just saying delusional things, but they're actually saying that were present from previous lifetimes. So there is a late psychiatrist named Ian Stevenson and his successor, who was a child psychiatrist, Jim Tucker, at the University of Virginia, who had accumulated more than 2,500 cases of kids with what they're calling spontaneous recall of a previous life. Which that phrase alone makes me wonder, is it called spontaneous recall? Because like it just came out of nowhere and like it wasn't present at another time. Do you know that answer, Greg?
Well, no, but I think that I'm going to touch on that as time goes on when I think of like possible explanations for this.
Okay.
Which I actually came up when we do get into that. They're not researched at all. They're just my possible explanations. So buckle up for that.
Much like a lot of the content of this episode.
That's right.
So,
Yes.
meaning past lives, not like our research, but
Right.
the idea of past lives. So these are young kids. They could be, the youngest, like talking about kids between 2 and 4 who begin talking about a former life. And then, like you said, this start to be verified. However, like they're able to nail down that a person existed within like the realm of what the child's talking about. This obviously gets a lot of critique.
Guff.
A lot of people, a lot of guff. Yeah. People kind of scoff.
Yeah, they do.
Scoff at this guff, like whatever. But in 1999, in a New York Times interview, Stevenson says, science develops ideas for what is so, and it becomes very difficult to force scientists to look at new data that may challenge existing concepts. He said that he's not trying in any way to replace what we know about genetics or environmental influences. All he's offering is that past lives may contribute to a third factor that may fill in some of the gaps in our knowledge. So he's not trying to create his own science. He's just telling scientists, stop being so rigid and need all this proof, because I got this theory that's going to fill in these gaps here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, let me have some fun here.
That's valid.
Yeah, I mean, nah.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, like we're not like laughing or saying that this can't exist. It's kind of based in nothing, right?
That's the
it's based
problem.
it's just based in what am I looking for? Anecdotal stories,
yeah,
and then matching that with verified times, and then that creates this disbelief that like how else, what other way can you explain this, right? And that's the scientific proof, which if that's all you need in order to connect an idea, then this is free. Then you would believe this, because there's definitely a lot that makes you think, wow, this exists.
Yeah, there's one case, very specific case, that I know that I looked into, really kind of had me guessing.
Yeah.
And wondering.
Sure. I mean, and there's obviously something going on. Interesting fact, well, what they're calling a fact, an interesting stat that they came up with is 70% of the kids with memories of a previous life recall dying by either murder, suicide, or an accident. And more than 35% of those show an intense fear related to the manner of death. So in Tucker's book, the Jim Tucker, Return to Life, he describes as that individual, the child that has the past life, kind of acting in a way that's avoidant, that like demonstrates avoidant behavior that's almost part of like what we would consider PTSD by the DSM currently.
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, what I feel like it argues is, or it presents to us, I should say, is this idea that maybe it's not just that like these specific kids have had past lives, but the reason that they're recalling the past life is because of the trauma. Maybe we all, or more than just these kids, actually have had past lives, but their way of death or tense fear hasn't impacted them as much to have them recall it in their next life or future life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really does give that idea that maybe this is a more common occurrence than just these cases.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about that too, which I think is kind of fascinating. So should we, and that's going to be fun for us to get into, because I have some interesting questions for you. And we are, hold on everyone, because I want you to stay with us, because we are really going to try to like get into the possible explanations, like with our, which is going to be interesting.
Before we get into our narratives, I did have this past life regression therapy that I wasn't familiar with at all prior. And I thought this was kind of an interesting method. So I've heard it done with kids, but it also gets done with adults, from my understanding, and actually probably more commonly with adults, I think.
Yeah, but Dave, I think it's along the same lines as when we talked about satanic panic and, repressed memories, like trying to bring up repressed memories.
Yes.
It's almost like suggestive questioning and like all kind of silliness.
So it's a method that uses hypnosis for the patient recover what they believe are memories from past lives or incarnations. The goal is to gain insight and spiritual understanding that can help them understand how their past lives influence their current life. However, this whole method is widely discredited and unscientific by medical practitioners because of pretty much what you just said. It's like, basically they kind of believe the past lives to be fantasies or delusions, because the questions are kind of like leading. Yeah, like you said, leading.
Well,
right?
like our brains are designed to like create stories to understand the world. So when you tell someone like when someone's feeling a certain way, it's like they can create a story to kind of validate those emotions. And, our subconscious definitely speaks a different language than we do. So when people have these stories in their subconscious from God knows where, movie shows, who knows, anything, we can scour the globe looking for it. And when you're looking for an answer, you'll find it. It's just kind of the way it is. And, it's funny because we were just talking about like, do we think it's important to look back into someone's past to help them, navigate their future? And it's like, maybe, but I'll tell you what we definitely don't need to do. Look into their past lives. I mean, right. or maybe that's for some people that's a validating. I guess we're also different and nuanced. It's like, who knows?
This method by some is considered to be unethical because of the potential to create false memories that can actually be more problematic.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp.
One of the things I've been thinking about lately is how effective just talking can be.
Yeah, so many of people hold on to things, Dave. We bottle them down. We feel our problems aren't big enough to need therapy, but this is the furthest thing from the truth.
And I know for me, therapy allowed me to have a space to discuss things I hadn't really discussed with anyone before.
That's true, Dave. And I wonder about some of those things you were talking about. It sparked my interest a little bit. But one of the greatest benefits of therapy is having your own space and being able to express whatever it is you've been holding on to.
With how convenient access is in today's day and age, there's absolutely no reason not to try therapy.
Exactly. And BetterHelp is one of the most convenient ways to give it a try. It's completely online and will work around your schedule, so you don't ever have to leave your house.
And the best part of it, if you don't get that tingly feeling from your selected therapist, you can switch it up with no fee.
Or maybe if you do get that tingly feeling, you might want to switch it up. But BetterHelp understands how important it is that you feel connected with your therapist.
So get it off your chest with BetterHelp.
And visit betterhelp.com/nothing today to get 10% off your first month.
That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/nothing. So
yeah, they're like, you were Hitler, and that's why you feel a lot of guilt.
Yeah.
You should.
And then that person, after this therapy can struggle with, that ability to be able to differentiate from like the true memories of actual events from those false memories that they have now developed.
And now, like, that sort of past defines them, which is something I always worry about. It's like, I can never be this kind of person, or I can never do this thing because this happened to me, right? Like it creates a narrative and it limits you. Yeah. So do you want me to go into I can be pretty quick with my narrative, but I think it's kind of really interesting.
Okay.
All right. So this is Shanti Devi. And what's interesting about this little young one is she didn't say a word until she was 4 years old, right? And when she did finally talk, she just immediately started speaking in articulate sentences. And what she was talking about really alarmed her parents. So she starts talking about her husband, her child. She says her real home is in a city called Mathura, which is actually pronounced Mathura, but the residents that live there all call it Mathura as sort of like a slang for the city, right? So you kind of have to be a resident to understand that. So she talks about her yellow house. She talks about her husband's birthmark. She talks about how her son was conceived and how she prays to Krishna every day. She uses slang words that she shouldn't know and gives her parents financial advice that there's no way she should be able to understand. She's like, and a lot of what she's saying is sort of verifiable, right? She's being very specific about the place where she lived. She says her name, like her name was Lydia, and this is where she lived. She lived in a yellow house in this specific city, right? So her parents, which like an aside to this, that's kind of interesting, is so her parents are Hindu, and that part of that religion is reincarnation, and they don't believe her. I always find that kind of interesting. It's like that's your religion, but when one of the central tenets of the religion shoves itself in your face, you're like, nah, I don't know about this.
Yeah.
Like, it's like if one of my kids came up to me with like stigmata or something like that, I'd be like, dude, what happened? Right. You know? So she's bullied in school. No one believes that she's reincarnated. Everyone thinks she's lying until they kind of don't, right? Until she's sort of super articulate. The teachers at her school start to think like, you know what? This might be worth just sending a letter to this man who she claims is her husband. And she does. So they get the name, they get the address, they write to him. He confirms that he lost a wife, same name. The little girl, Shanti, is able to tell her teachers what she died from, like the actual disease, and she seemed to know a lot about it. And she, so the husband kind of puts her to the test. He doesn't show up. He sends someone else to show up and pretend that it's him. And she's like, no, you're not my husband. And she kind of like, you know what I mean? So it's like really interesting. It's not an anecdote because it's such a popular thing in like 1930s India that the news reaches Gandhi, right? So Gandhi's like, all right, we need to kind of either prove or disprove this whole thing. And so they take a road trip, probably a dirt road trip. I'm just kidding. Is that not good? Anyways, they go with a bunch of journalists and academics, and they take her to the little city. She leads them to her house. She talks about all the things that have changed in the neighborhood. She greets people who she shouldn't know who they are. And so they have this board of people, this committee that they put together to kind of decide whether this is almost like a canonization in the Catholic Church, right? To sort of decide, hey, is this a saint or not? So they get this committee together and they sort of say, okay, yeah, this is a proven case of reincarnation. And to this day, it has not been debunked.
So it's real.
Well, I mean, if you just believe that story I told you, like you can certainly be led to believe it isn't real. But then, I'm sure we'll get into it. All right. That's my narrative.
Well, the good thing is I rarely believe the stories you tell me, so I don't believe this story.
I mean, it's almost like I believe that they believe it.
Yeah.
And you know what? Honestly, I don't know. What the hell do I know? But I want to get into.
There's something there.
There's something there. Exactly. And like, we'll talk about what our explanations can be. And we'll leave room for the possibility of this being real. Because, I mean, who are we to say that this can't exist?
Yeah.
Half of the world's religions believe it exists. I mean, it's not a popular thought in Western culture.
Yeah.
But as far as Eastern culture goes, it's huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what do you got?
All right. So we have a woman named Virginia, and Tig. I don't know how to say her last name. It's Tighe. Look it up, people. She's from Pueblo, Colorado, and she, in 1952, she does this hypnotist thing with a guy named Maury Bernstein, who I think getting pretty famous from this. But he does this hypnotist thing with her, and in a trance, she starts to discuss things of an alleged past life as a 19th century Irish woman. Bernstein actually used the hypnotic regression that we were describing, which the subject is gradually taken back to their childhood. He then attempted to take Virginia one step further before birth and was astonished to find that he was actually listening to Bridie Murphy, who is this 19th century Irish woman that she was describing. So Virginia recalls that in 1806, Bridie was 8 years old living in a house in Cork. She was the daughter of Duncan Murphy, a barista, not a barista, and his wife Kathleen. And at the age of 17 in 1815, she married Sean Brian McCarthy, who she claimed taught at Queen's University Belfast, to which she moved. I mean, she's giving a ton of information. She actually was able to tell that of a fall that caused Bridie's death in 1864, and she described watching her own funeral and describing her tombstone and the state of being in life after death.
Oh, so she talked a little bit about like that,
all of it,
like the intermission period, they call it.
She described it as feeling of neither pain nor happiness. So that doesn't sound wonderful.
That sounds kind of not great.
Not very euphoric or at all. So she was, Virginia was born Virginia May Reese in the Midwest in 1923. Never been to Ireland. She didn't speak even with the slightest hint of an Irish accent. However, when she spoke as Murphy, with a heavy accent, and she used Irish expressions, some of which were not used in the 19th century, though. So, yeah, I don't know. That was an interesting story. This that guy ended up writing. No, actually, it wasn't him. So there's someone named William J. who published a bunch of articles in her Post in 1954, and then a book was released by Bernstein called The Search for Bridie Murphy, and that book was actually turned into a movie in 1956 of the same name, if people are interested in that story.
So did anybody did they figure out that there was a Bridie Murphy?
Yeah.
And all that kind of lined up?
As far as I know.
Okay. Well, look, we got to start talking about, all right, let me just say this. And back to the
only thing that's weird is she's using Irish slang, but it stated that some of it, which was not used during the 19th century when Bridie Murphy was alive.
Yeah, so like you disprove it when you get it wrong, right? I mean, you can't just be like, oh, well, she kind of almost got it right.
So was this woman? Yeah, it questioned like what was the intention here if this wasn't real? Was it to get a little publicity? Did she up things? I don't. But like, how would she? Well, I guess maybe that was in her subconscious. Maybe she
exactly. She like her
to things that she wasn't being forthcoming about.
It's interesting that you say that. It was in her subconscious because when we talked about Jung, we talked about this idea of the collective unconscious. Like we all see beauty. We're kind of all born with knowledge. We know what creepy is. We know if something's beautiful, something's ugly. We had this like memory of things that we've never seen somehow, right? And is that just some people tapping into that? Like, is that what this is? Like, maybe it's not their memories, but the memories of other people. And we're talking about people who are future clairvoyants or mediums. Like, maybe this is what a child, having one of these, I don't know, like a parapsychology type skills, right? Like, I mean, do you believe that there's a possibility that people could be a medium or clairvoyant? Do you believe in that?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
I think you already know my answer.
I think I do too. Okay. Well,
do you? Yeah.
I think I do. I do. Yeah. I also think, so I'll say this to the people who say like, hey, here's my kid. They're having these like memories of Vietnam or whatever. And they say something along the lines of like, these memories didn't come from thin air. Like they didn't make this up. And what I say to that is, aren't dreams just memories of things that didn't happen? Right?
That's a interesting way to put it.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Thank you for saying that. And I'll tell you why. Because I sat up in bed and like wrote that down because I was thinking about it. I'm like, what are these like thoughts? Like, where are they coming from? Like, what can explain this? And then it's like, when I go to sleep tonight, I'm going to have memories when I wake up potentially, if I remember my dreams, of things that just didn't happen. And it's such an interesting concept. So we're all sort of capable of this. And maybe a child is sort of, and then you spit this out to your parents. And if you look far and wide, you can kind of line that up with just about anybody's life, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's kind of a debunking thing. But let me play devil's advocate here for a moment, if you don't mind.
Good.
So maybe this does happen, right? And part of our brain's job, like maybe this happens to everyone. Maybe reincarnation is just the thing. And part of our brain's job is to block these past memories out. And some of us are born with a deficit in that brain circuit. So some memories slip past the goalie, right? And kind of like you were mentioning before, to continue off that a little bit and really go off the wall, if it could be like a spirit with unfinished business, right? And when it inhabits a different body, the new brain functions try to block out those memories. But since it was such a strong emotion, some of it makes it through. Like you can imagine if like a pirate, I don't know why I think like a pirate like hiding his treasure and they get killed before he tells anyone, or like, I don't know, someone, you die in one of these ways. Maybe you can think of a better example where you're like, I'm just not done. Like there's so much I needed to do. I was robbed of something, and that emotion's so strong that when whatever happens to your spirit, it just can't get over it. It can't be completely refreshed, and it carries that with it to its next destination.
Sure.
Well, you brought up Ian Stevenson. He said something along the lines of like 72% of these things, or like, some stat that it was like the majority of these cases are, or 72% exactly, have to do with unnatural or early deaths, like untimely deaths.
That's kind of the thing that I mentioned earlier. It's like that obviously something impactful happened. It seems like that's kind of the key thing here. Something impactful that stays. I was listening to some other sources that maybe a little less credible than
sure, but severely more credible than us.
Yes, or people, yeah, because they're just actually, like not joking. They are, because they're actually just way more versed in this stuff. Yeah. But like there was some people talking about hearing children actually describing of picking who their parents are going to be. So there was more like purpose behind, like, or maybe it was like attached to another family member, like their original origin was like attached to like somehow family member of the family they choose to be born into, or something like that. So there's almost this idea that maybe there's even some choice happening in between our lives, between our material lives. Yeah. Like maybe there's a benefit even to the parent that this kid's going to be born there, because maybe they're going to serve some function if they can figure out their purpose.
And do you think it's like a risk? It's like, all right, well, this can be your parent. Like you choose your parent, but it's like you don't know how it's going to end up, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like that makes me think of someone telling me a long time ago. I can't remember.
You can pick your nose, but you can't pick your family.
Yeah.
No, that's now been debunked.
Yeah. No, this idea that like it's really like, I think for a lot of people, sort of makes them feel better about being depressed. And it's this idea, if you could have this idea, like you were in this intermission place before you were put into a body, you could, and someone said to you, hey, look, you can go into this body, but you'll feel all the joy, all the pain, sad, scared, all the emotions. Or you can go into this body and feel none of the emotions. You'll never be hurt. You'll never feel pain, but you'll never feel joy and all these things. Like, which one would you choose? And I think most people say that they would rather feel all the emotions than just no emotions.
Sure.
Like like as a sailor, we tell this thing, like which person would you rather be, like the sailor that was out in the crazy storm and almost died, and it was this harrowing experience. It was so scary and it was just wild. Or you're coming back to, would you rather be the sailor that gets to come back and tell that story, or would you rather be the guy that was on the shore that's just listening to it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you sign up for this life of the spectrum of emotions and experiences. And I think that's what's beautiful about it, right?
So the thing that's really striking me about this topic today is I was convinced you were going to do some spooky version of this.
Mhm.
You're going to make this some dark, like, isn't that creepy, Dave? You're going to say that like five times in the episode, or isn't that so creepy? And I was going to say, no, you didn't do that at all, because this is not creepy. It could be. I mean, how many movies have we seen where a child is reincarnated from like a serial killer or something? I'm trying to remember. There's a specific movie that I'm not thinking of.
What's that movie? There's a movie that like the spirit jumps from person to person. I think, is it Relic or something? Body Snatch.
There is one specific movie, and there's even like a therapy scene where the boy like has to like pretend to not be the past life person. Like he's reincarnated. He like a killer dies, and like he's born on the same day, and the killer goes into his. I don't remember what the heck movie
I know. Yeah, I'm surprised you don't remember. But you want to know why I didn't go creepy with this? Because it's actually sort of beautiful. And I mean that in this way, because it's like all we want as human beings is hope. And this kind of, one of the hardest things we have to deal with in our experience is loss and grief, right? And if you can really believe in reincarnation, then you never have to experience loss.
Yeah.
Right? Because that person may be gone now, but you kind of have this opportunity to find them in someone else, right? They're just out there in another form, and they're not gone at all. They're never gone. And you won't be gone either. It's
another way of processing the idea that like this life is important. Mm-hmm. And it's, actually this makes it even more important, knowing that like we could potentially bring things from this life into other lives. So you got to make the most of this life and live it to the fullest, not squander it, and hopefully, not fall down a set of stairs like Bridie Murphy or whatever. But it really does make the life meaningful. And then it's kind of nice to think that like, we were talking, I forget if we said this on an episode or if it was an off air conversation, but about like this idea of like not having religion as much. And, there's obviously reasons for that. And I think I brought this up where the idea of not having religion, though, is kind of brings up more existential dread, because it's like, then what's the point of all this?
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's scary. Like, I'm just going to go into the dirt and then I'm just shutting down like a robot. So when you can think of it as like, there's a point, something's going to happen after this. And like, I'm not just doing this all for nothing, and it's not scary to die because I can hopefully continue to live on in some other way. I think that's a really nice thought.
I do too. I think spirituality really adds, substance to people's lives. Not to say that, like if we turn on a movie just because we know it's going to end, like we wouldn't shut it off halfway through because it's going to end, right? It's still like we want to experience the thing.
Depends on the movie. Yeah.
So, okay, fair enough. But like there is some value to knowing like this will end. But I think putting your faith in something that's like bigger than you, or like, kind of like a lot of people can get behind, I think that's a really cool thing. And I don't think there's enough, and I don't care what form of spirituality you're into. I think it's kind of makes life a little more meaningful.
And that's what this is all about. Like, when we're talking about reincarnation, rebirth, past lives, I mean, we're talking about like explanations that go across various religions, but it's still universal in the way that like it's understood amongst those religions, even if it has a different term, even if it has some different details built into it. It's still a concept that is built into these religions. So it's like, like you said, it doesn't matter what your specific personal belief is. The spirituality like goes beyond just like this denomination.
Right. No, because what we're talking about here is like a soul.
Yeah.
Right. Something in essence that's outside of the vessel that's your body. Like, I mean, you've obviously, and we're getting to an age where we've been to a funeral or a wake or two, right? And so there is something to be said for when you see that body of that person that you used to know and love, and you look at them and you're like, they're not there.
Something's missing.
Isn't that something, right? I mean, it's you can't quantify that. It's hard to explain that. Like the Dalai Lama said, it's hard to disprove the existence of a spirit because you do feel. It's almost when we talk about like Capgras syndrome, where you can see someone's face and you can recognize them. Like I could see you and I can recognize you as Dave, but since I have that like deficit in the amygdala or whatever area is we're talking about that's processing the emotion for that specific thing, I see you but I don't get the emotion from you. I don't recognize you, right? There is something to that. Like I don't know what it is, but
now something interesting to think about. So we just discussed past lives, and let's say you're a parent that has a child who's stating they have a past life, or you're a therapist and someone walks into your office stating they have a past life. If we were talking to Jim Tucker or Ian Stevenson, if we're talking to Ian Stevenson, then we're talking to someone from a past who has a past life because he's no longer with us. But if
we're talking about one of your Ouija boards,
but if we were talking to him, I think what they would tell us to do is to talk to treat that person, validate them, treat them as though they're maybe dealing with something, like I said, like symptoms of PTSD. If there's like an intense fear related to, whatever that caused that death or whatever, in their previous life. But like,
I'm surprised that a psychiatrist would do that because it's almost like, how would we approach someone who came to us talking about irrational beliefs?
No, but Greg, actually, I disagree with you because when you deal with someone with schizophrenia, you don't tell them they're wrong.
That's true.
So I mean, let's say this person is either has a past life or they're schizophrenic. You're not, neither way would you tell them they're wrong.
But what if they were just somebody who wasn't schizophrenic and these past thoughts were really bothering them? We would probably say like, well, you're giving too much salience to these thoughts that really mean nothing. It would almost be like a cognitive distortion and treated the same way. Like
they're not thoughts, they're memories.
I mean,
experiences, Greg. So they're giving too much salience to the memories. I don't know that we would say that more. We would probably go more along the lines of, well, let's try to make meaning out of these memories. Let's try to figure out how we can identify strengths from these memories and like, how do we get past this?
But would you treat a dream the same way?
They're not coming and telling me they had dreams.
No, but it's true though. I mean, I just want to say it again because I did kind of think of that like dreams, just memory.
No, all right. So I do actually, when I do like, I would never say I do dream work, but like,
I think I do. Why not
use that phrase though?
I might now.
Can you please put that in your bio?
Yeah, dream work, tons of dream work.
CBT, dream work, Dream Master.
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Master. No, Dream Warriors, sorry. So when I'm working with someone on a dream, a lot of that dream is trying to decode, well, what's the meaning here? What is this dream trying to tell you and trying to, what's it saying about how you're feeling right now? And what is that? What can we do going forward to kind of address that? So it's addressing, and the dream represents something.
Unless it doesn't. See that we're sometimes have different schools of thoughts with dreams, thoughts. Like so I think that most of the time I think thoughts are completely meaningless.
Yeah.
And that's just, that's why I'm starting to lean a little bit more towards mindfulness.
Yeah.
And maybe why some of these, in these religions, they talk a lot about meditation because I mean, maybe you need it.
It's just really hard to convince a person that their thoughts are meaningless.
It is.
And I mean, that you deal with OCD thoughts. So you're dealing with like intent, but actually maybe that's why it's easier for you to tell yourself the thoughts are meaningless. Cause with OCD thoughts, they literally are, right?
Yeah.
It's intense fear or like separation over something that really does not matter that much in the bigger scheme.
Yep.
So I get that. And that makes a lot of sense now that I think about it that way. The average person having an average thought, I think it's harder to convince them that thought means nothing. That's just me. Maybe it's not that hard. I don't know. It might not be that hard. Who knows? Let's try it out. Everybody, your thoughts are meaningless. Send us feedback.
Send us feedback on that. I mean, you get to choose. All right, let me rephrase that a little bit. You get to choose which thoughts are meaningful and meaningless. Like you have some thoughts that are obviously like good and useful, but then you have other thoughts that show up that like, that don't really represent you. So they don't feel good. They're ego dystonic thoughts. Okay. So you could say, that's a useless thought. That's not who I am. Just because I had that thought doesn't make me that kind of person or a bad person or, something like that. Anyways, we always end up getting into these thought conversations. What did you think? This used to be this past life regression, or not past life regression. These past lives used to be an explanation for gender dysmorphia, which is interesting.
Dysphoria?
Yeah, I guess dysphoria. Any kind of like transgender, like however you want to like think about it. It's you think that you feel like you were born a woman. No, you just used to be one, and now you're actually born a guy. Now you get used to it, right?
That's a fascinating thought,
right?
Huh? That just made me. I know. Kind of just blew my mind because I didn't know that was connected, and or that was like a previous train of thought. But what a interesting way for them to think about it previously. And I'm not saying I believe this to be the case, but does that change the person's desire to, want to change at this point, or how they feel about themselves now? No, but it's an interesting, two things could be true at the same time.
Sure. And it could also probably, be used to explain we're not saying it's used to explain like transgender or homosexuality or anything like that. But you could see how
you could make it like fit almost any narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is super interesting, actually.
Yeah.
It is why am I the way I am? Oh, just because that's who I used to be.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of interesting. The people used to do another thing I thought it was kind of cool. They would put like experimental marks on loved ones and try to see if it showed up on other people, right? So if like your kid was really sick and in the hospital and like it's a really sad situation, this is one of the narratives that I looked into. They put marks on them, and that way, they could find them. Like I said before, like that's the hardest thing in life sometimes is loss. And, we can convince ourselves that this thing exists. We get rid of that harsh, extreme reality. So loss keeps hope alive.
I'm not going to lie. This year has been a tough year as far as losses go. I've been surrounded by a number recently. And the idea that there's a way that in some future you reconnect with these people, or not just people, pets and things like that, kind of brings a level of comfort that I think is like really, really needed.
So it's interesting. That's interesting that you say that, because I've had people who I've talked to who were not religious at all, just super atheists, agnostic, however you want to. They had no religion in their life, and then they lost someone who was extremely important to them, and they could not live in a world where it was possible that they were never going to see this person again, or there was no chance that they were going to see this person, or they were just gone forever, and that led them to spirituality.
I get it.
Which I get it too. I get it too.
Yeah.
And Dave, I have one more really important question for you.
Okay.
What would you come back as, given the choice?
It will always be a dog.
Really?
Of course.
Because they were treated so well?
Just dogs are awesome.
Dogs are awesome.
I love the idea that you can get pleasure out of something as small as the smell of grass, and you just live to love. And hopefully you find it. Hopefully you are treated well. That would always be my hope. But it's just the simple life.
It's finding joys in very small things is such a beautiful thing. Like I'm actually rereading The Count of Monte Cristo. It's like my favorite book. And when he's in the cell, he kind of like learns that he gets like he finds like a piece of metal, and it made him so happy. And he remembers thinking like, wow, like this is making me happy. And he also finds like he's in that cell, and what makes him happy is he finds some companionship. He finds another person somehow, like miraculously, and together they have the hope that they might escape. So the possibility of a dream coming true, like we see in The Alchemist, and like I just think all this stuff is connected. Like, hope, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of what it's all about.
Yeah. Just this theme today is bringing up a lot of stuff, but one of the things you said there, and like I think is really important for people, and like ironically, we kind of made a post today about just enjoying it, being in the moment, and kind of like intentionally seeking out small things that you can take appreciation of and you can find happiness from, I think is so important. Because like you mentioned, like I think it's easier for, let's say, a prisoner to find happiness in a small thing than it is for us living these busy, free lives and not ever taking a second to just say, wow, it's a gorgeous day out.
Mm-hmm.
Or wow, look at how beautiful that tree looks. Or
no, I know it sounds silly, but it's true.
I have this bush in front of my house, and I was so excited to watch it bloom this year. It's a hydrangea bush, I think it is. And it's got these big purple flowers all over it. And I knew it was going to be rhododendron. That's what it is. Thank you. I knew it was going to be huge this year. It lasted for like 2 weeks, but it was like the best 2 weeks. And it was one moment in particular that I was looking forward to, and it happened. It like the purple like kind of went into my kitchen at like the perfect time of day, like when it wasn't too bright out, and like in the way it's in the window. It was just like this beautiful moment. And I actually was able to like identify I was waiting for this moment, and this was really like nice. And I just kind of took it in. You have to think about those things in order to actually appreciate them, though. If you don't think about things like that, you're never going to have those little moments of appreciation that feel so good.
And extend them like you did, right? Like instead of just being like, oh, look at that, that's nice. Just take a moment, savor that, like enjoy it for a second. I mean, we are all gonna die, whether or not we have a past life or not. Or we're gonna be, reincarnated to something else. Who knows? But we have a limited amount of time here. And remembering that's kind of important, because that makes it more meaningful. It makes it like start living, because it's temporary, and you should be enjoying these little things. And I wasn't going to go to the beach and enjoy that sort of that time, but I just looked at the water, and like honestly, for like a minute, it was just peace,
Yeah.
Just standing there. And
I went to the beach the same day, and I went in the water, and I actually did like a grounding exercise in the water, because I wanted to just be very much in the moment. It was so quiet and peaceful there, and it was beautiful. And I just, finding myself wanting to make more of those moments more recently. So I hope that other people can kind of feel inspired by that, and like maybe do that as well. So then, kind of appreciating this gift of life that we have.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know it was going to go this way, but I'm glad it did.
This wasn't spooky at all.
Wasn't spooky at all. So maybe we should get into something.
Where's the true crime in this episode too?
I know. Well, you know what? I don't know, but I think that like every once in a while to have somehow this turned a little bit uplifting. Yeah. I think that's important too.
Absolutely.
But Dave, yeah, like thank you to everyone who has been listening. We need more reviews, please.
So what Greg means to say is thank you for listening. If you have a moment and you have not done so, we would love for you to share what you feel about your experience with this podcast has been. A rating and review is an amazing way to do that, because it does help the podcast itself get out there more openly to the public. But also, if you want to just send a more personal message, the fan mail has been great. And you can also send us an email at utgnpodcast@gmail.com, or message us on social media. We are on Instagram and X, formerly Twitter. And we are making a valiant effort to step up our social media game. So you might even see a thoughtful reel here and there posing a question, maybe some thoughts we have, or a skit here and there. If you guys have been following our social media for a while, we did start off a while back doing a number of skits that we thought were funny. I don't know if everyone else did. I enjoyed doing them. We might bring some of those back. Unless you tell us to stop, then we won't.
Well, yeah, we'll do whatever you say. So I wanted to say thank you to Caroline Baldwin, who has been listening, and we had a nice little conversation, and I thank her for the support.
Yeah, you posted a video the other day, a reel that asked a question. We got some great responses from that, and I want to thank everybody who reached out to kind of share with us. The question being, do you need to focus on the past when doing therapy, or is it okay to sometimes just focus on where you want to go? And the feedback was great. So, and Greg, good job for you. Doing the reel. It's and just engaging with everyone. So I know that's hard sometimes to do that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do it. I'm just pretty bad at technology, so we're working on that.
Yeah, we're trying to build up the YouTube page too. So if people are, looking for ways to listen other than just the streaming, we're also on YouTube, and we're thinking about video at some point. So
yeah,
if we do, that will be on the YouTube page, but we'll keep you guys posted. So that's pretty much all I got.
That's it. All right, buddy.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Please have yourself a great week. Happy June. We'll be back next week. That's all I got to say. Have a great night. Peace out.